And shalom, benvenuti a tutti, and welcome everyone. I'm honored and delighted to be a part of my Jewish learning and thank all of you for joining me today. And I'm so happy to bring the Jews of Southern Italy to all of you. So my first question is this. Have you been to Italy? Have you been to Italy? Well, a lot of you have, yes. Even if you have not, there's one thing that we all know, and that would be that Italy is shaped like like a boot. Italy is shaped like a boot. And for the most part, when we visit Italy, especially for the first time, we're drawn to Rome, we're drawn to Florence, we're drawn to Venice all the way up here, and maybe a little further south to Naples, but for the most part, when we don't see southern Italy, we a lot of times, many times we pass through Calabria right here in the instep and the toe of the boot. We pass right through to go on to the island of Sicily. And we're going to talk a little bit about Italy's best kept secret and about some of the literally hundreds of little villages which have a historical Jewish presence throughout South Italy, especially the region of Calabria. Italian Jewish families date back thousands of years to the time of the Maccabees, when Jews left Judea voluntarily and came to Italy and became the world's first diaspora Jews. Centuries later, at the time of the expulsion from Spain, the violent Inquisition that followed, Jews left Spain and settled on the islands of Sicily and Sardinia, as well as the Aeolian island chain, and then to the toe and the foot of the boot. And that would be Calabria, from where I'm speaking to all of you today. These Jews were running from persecution, and they were running from forced conversion. And there is a Hebrew word for this phenomenon. It's called anusim, and it literally means the forced ones. So we are b'nai anusim, the descendants or the children of those who were forced. So we ask ourselves, forced? How? In Spain, beginning in 1492, Jews were forced to do one of two things: to convert to Christianity or to leave the country. Those who converted, and that was what happened to many of my own ancestors, they were called Marranos, an insulting term meaning pig. Others took their practices underground, like my father's family, and they practiced in secret, and we would call those crypto Jews. Many of these crypto or secret Jewish families were desperate to cling to a remnant of their Jewish traditions. But how could they do that and not be found out? How could they avoid harassment, persecution, physical danger to themselves and their families? Well, they did it by hiding in plain sight. So come with me as together we investigate the Calabrian mountain towns along with my own little village called Serra Stretta to see with our own eyes the remarkable things that my Jewish ancestors did to keep their traditions alive, to demonstrate in a subtle but definitive way there is a Jewish presence here. So let's go. Let's take a look at our first slide. Full disclosure, that's not my Vespa. It's my cousin's. And on the rare occasions that I do ride it, I do have a helmet on, but it shows you the beautiful panorama behind me as well. And we're going to begin by traveling actually down to the village of Nicastro in the old city center that was the heartbeat of Jewish life. And there we find King Frederick's castle. Let's take a look at that. And there it is. This is the castle of King Frederick II, a benevolent monarch who appreciated the economic prosperity that the Jews of Nicastro offered to the region. King Frederick ruled over southern Italy during the 1200s, and at that time it was good for the Jews. In fact, the old Jewish quarter is called Timpone, and let's take a look at the plaque there. It exists today where an impressive plaque honors their memory. And the plaque reads, "In this quarter, there worked an industrious group of Jews," and leads through an archway to the synagogue that centuries later was confiscated by the Inquisition authorities to become a Catholic church. But look here, let's look at that synagogue for just a moment. Yes. During Inquisition times, when synagogues were closed and transformed into churches, it was customary to allow a remnant of Jewish tradition to remain. Why? Well, most likely superstition, maybe fear. Knowing that they had stolen the synagogue, it was thought that leaving a bit of Judaism behind might absolve them of their feelings of guilt. And so look what was left. It is the remnant, do you see it? Of the Magen David, of the Star of David. It remained not only on the original synagogue of Nicastro, but this truncated star became an architectural symbol and is found on buildings that once were synagogues all throughout Calabria and even the island of Sicily as well. But sadly, the Jews were driven out. And why? Well, the long arm of the Inquisition reached from Spain to Portugal, to Sicily, to the Italian mainland, and to Timpone, the area we've just discovered. But what was it really like? Let's step back in time to hear exactly what happened. Grazie a Dio. Baruch di. Now, now I can talk to you. Per favore, scusami for my appearance. I left in great haste, and I did not have time to find another covering, so I continued to use this, the blue scarf that we Jewish women of the South were forced to wear when we ventured out from Timpone, the old Jewish quarter of Nicastro. Blue, bruta, awful, how I hate it. It is the color that the prostitutes must wear. And then, when the persecution began, we Jewish women were demeaned and made to wear this color of disgrace. Male, male, bad, bad. How bad has it become for us Jews of the South? I will tell you how bad. After many years of tranquilita, when we Jews were respected for our lending of money, for our honest dealings with our neighbors, Jews and Christians both, the bishop, he stopped our work. Last year in 1623 in Nicastro, my home, and in the nearby towns of Catanzaro, and even in the coast of Tropea, the whole south was devastated by La Terremoto, earthquakes. Earthquakes so bad that the rocks, big like this, they covered the land. The people, they lost so much. They came to us. They came to the Jews for help to start again. Of course, they come to us. We Jews were the money lenders, and we took our responsibility to our community very, very seriously. Come, we said, we will lend the money you need to buy the seeds, to buy the plants. Our rates were low. We helped everyone. We turned no one away. But then come the authorities. They create a new società, a new group to lend the money, charging their suffering neighbors double, triple the rate of interest. Then, oi, 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 what do? They force the Jews to stop their work as bankers to the poor. They force us to flee. But as we were leaving our beloved Timpone, our Jewish quarter, where never once were we locked inside the gate, we are required to wear the hated blue for the women and the orange patch, the rotella for the men. We, our Christian neighbors, they cried out to us, tears falling from their eyes. Ebrei, Ebrei, non lasciarci. Jews, Jews, please don't leave us. Help us now, as you helped us before. How I wanted to stay, but I knew we could not. So now, after so many years of good, so many years of il bene, Now in the South, it was bad. It was bad for the Jews. So what happened? Well, the Jews traveled north to find safety and security in the mountains. They looked for an isolated area where they could create a hidden Jewish community. First, in the small village called Cigliano, and then in the village of my ancestors, the village of Serastreta. What evidence of a hidden Jewish presence do we find? Well, we begin in the most unlikely of places, parish church. And here we are now at the church door. Let's take a look at the church door. There we go. Yes. We're first, before we enter the church, we're going to study these massive metal doors. They are huge and stately with intricate panels that depict what? Not Christian scenes, but scenes that show the life of the village. And now let's look at the close-up of one of these panels. Yes, there we go. Here we see a panel that highlights the making of chairs, a craft brought from Spain and still practiced today. Other panels show a weeping family about to immigrate to parts unknown, while other panels feature folk dancing and Jewish women weavers creating cloth from the ginestra, or as we would say in English, the broom plant, all created by local artists who featured not religious scenes, but crafts that the Jews who settled the town brought with them all the way from Spain. And now let's go inside the church. Here we are inside the Catholic Church. In the middle of the sanctuary, we look up, expecting to see a Christian depiction, Jesus, Mary, saints, but no. Directly above the heads of the faithful, we see Moses and the Ten Commandments, and surrounding him are a number of the prophets. Calabrian artists whose families were once Jewish created this fresco as a way of saying Jewish tradition is not lost. Later on, when Jewish families felt more secure, they decorated the cortile, the courtyard, in front of their homes. And let's take a look at the Magen David in an unlikely place. Oh, those are my cats. Those are 4 of the 6. I've lived here in this village for 18 years, and hardly a month goes by without a local approaching me. "Oh, Rabina, Rabina," they say, come look. We are working on restoring an abandoned house. Come look what we found. And yes, the workers have uncovered yet another Star of David, often hidden underneath ceramic tile, wooden boards, concrete, or even astroturf. Strong evidence that Sarastretta's Jewish presence was everywhere, and was the case in dozens of villages throughout these mountains. The Inquisition authorities were indeed relentless. They pursued the Jews, and eventually they found us, taking our synagogues and transforming them into churches. The synagogue here in Serastreta suffered the same fate. And let's look at the remaining walls. There they are. That is you're looking at the ruins of the original synagogue. Actually, the 2 remaining walls of what was our original synagogue, active almost 500 years ago. The structure crumbled during the earthquake of the 1908, and those 2 walls remain. But now the town is working to gather funds to restore the building as an interfaith cultural center. We're hoping that it will feature a Judaica library and exhibits depicting the history of Calabrian Jewish life. Now let's take a look at Rabbi Barbara. There I am. There I am. I was fortunate to grow up in America. I was the first person in my family born in the United States. My family settled in Pittsburgh. And as a youngster, people would ask me my name, and I would say, my name is Barbara Aiello. And then if religion came up and I told them about my background, the synagogue my father sometimes took me to, the things we did at home, some people would look at me in disbelief and say something that I've heard all my life. But you can't be Jewish. You're Italian. Later on, I became a Jewish professional and later a rabbi, and the same things continued to happen. And now bring me back here. I'll show you, give you an example of what kinds of things happened to me as a young Jewish professional. No, we want to bring me back. There we go. So this is what would happen. I would meet someone and we'd talk a little bit about my background. Then it would usually move to something like this. Aiello. That's an Italian name. Yes, yes, it is. So that's your married name. No, 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 that's my own name. That's the name I was born with. Oh, now I understand. You're a convert. You converted. No, no, actually, I was born Jewish. So your parents, they had a mixed marriage. Your father, he was the Italian, and your mother was Jewish. No, no, actually, both my parents were Jewish. Really? So what was your mother's name? Elena Siciliano. But that's Italian. Yes, my mother was from Sicily, my father from Calabria, and their names were Siciliano and Aiello. But those are Italian names. How can you be Jewish? Oy vey. So we're going to take a look at surnames for just a moment. And now let's bring up our next photo. It's 11 surnames that I'm going to share with you right now. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. I hope we can see that last one there. As everyone can see it? Okay, very good. So these are surnames that you might have heard, but maybe you didn't know that they have a rich Jewish history. And I'm going to share them with you. Spagnolo, Vita, Bonanno, Sacco and Zacco, Catalano, Romano, De Fazio, De Fazio, and Di Fazio, Sacerdoti, Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, and Ferranti, and the last one, Aiutami Cristo. Now, is there someone in our audience? I'm sure there might be one, and I'm going to have Mara take a look, who would like to know the Jewish history of one of these surnames. And we're going to leave Aiutami Cristo to the last. Do you see anybody who's put a surname in there, Mara?
We see a few others that aren't on the list. We have Farone, we have a Corrado, and
Somebody want to pick something from the list?
let's do Sacerdoti, if I said that correct.
Sacerdoti. Well, Mara, that's a wonderful choice because this is an Italian Jewish name, the translation of which most Jews are familiar with, especially throughout North America and throughout the Ashkenazi community, because Sacerdoti is the Italian translation of Cohen. Anybody else have another one?
Let's do Bonanno.
Bonanno. Okay, let's see here. Bonanno means, of course, in Italian, good year, buona anno, and it is a translation of Shana Tova. We have another one?
Yeah, Ferranti and
Oh,
Ferrari.
let's take a look at that one. At that one, yes, indeed. Ferraro, Ferrari, Ferro, and Ferranti. They're all variations of the same name, and it comes from the root word in Spanish for metal and also in Italian. And the Jews became skilled craftspeople at creating decorative wrought iron. And I'm sure if you've traveled to Spain, you've seen some of these absolutely glorious balconies, very intricately designed. And you'd see the same thing here in southern Italy. As a matter of fact, walking to Timpone, as in the little Italian Jewish quarter that we mentioned earlier. And so anyone with that surname has roots going all the way back to Spain, and they were the craftspeople who made decorative wrought iron. We can do one more.
Catalono.
Catalano, is that the one? Did you say?
Yes, sorry,
No,
yeah.
that's okay. Catalano, of course, comes from Catalan, and it comes from Spain, from one of the areas of Spain. And we find that when Jews took surnames that replicated a place where they were from. For example, Squillace is a surname we often hear in the U.S. It's a name of a town that was a very strong Jewish settlement here in the South. And taking the name Catalano was a way of identifying yourself as Jewish without having to be overt about it. If you heard any of the surnames, but especially those that are named after a place, also like Spagnolo, would fall into that category as well, then you knew that you were talking to someone who also had Jewish roots like yourself. And that was important for marriage purposes, especially during the time of the shidduch or the matrimonio combinato, the arranged marriage. Let's look at Aiutami Cristo, the last one. The very last one is the name of one of our congregants. Her first name is Patrizia. And Patrizia called me from Sicily a number of years ago. And she said she had heard about our synagogue, and I invited her to come. And she said, "But I have to tell you, Rabbi, that about my family. My great grandmother lived with us when I was about 5 and 6 years old. And she did a lot of things that I have come to find out are Jewish. She put a white tablecloth on the table and lit 2 candles on Friday night. He didn't say we were Jewish, but later, as I talked about these traditions, many of them, I realized they were Jewish traditions. And so my friends would say, "But Patrizia, you must be Jewish." And then they asked me my surname, and I would say, "Aiutami Cristo, help me Christ." And my friends would say, "You can't be Jewish with a name like that." And I said, "Patrizia, you are Jewish with a name like that, because there was a time when Jews were forced into Christian conversion, and in order to keep the Inquisition on arm's length, they acted like and pretended to be very, very devout Christians. And they even took on names like Lo Spirito or De Santis or I can't think of another one right now, but there are many of them, many surnames that have a Gentile. Gentile is another one, which allowed Jewish people to pretend to be very devout and maybe maintain their traditions in secret. So you want to bring me, thank you. Do you want to bring me back up here? Oh, another one is Christiana, which means Christian woman. Di Dio, Son of God, Di Gesù. And they, as I said, they fall into the category of invented surnames adopted by Jews who were forced into Christian conversion. So the list itself is important because it represents only a tiny portion of the Italian surnames that have strong Jewish roots. And if you look at my website, you'll on Italian Jewish roots on the drop-down menu, you'll find a long, long list of them. There are hundreds more, and there are these are names of Italians who many times have no knowledge of their Jewish history, but were drawn to Jewish tradition, and many of who married Jews. So if those are Jewish surnames, if they indeed are ancient Calabrian and Sicilian Jewish surnames, the question is, what happened to these Jews? How come there are no synagogues, no Jewish schools, no cemeteries or libraries housing ancient manuscripts? How is it that so few Italian Americans, so few Italian Canadians know that centuries ago their families were Jewish? Well, for thousands of years, Jews practiced in secret. And who were these Jews, and what did they do to keep the flame of Judaism burning in their souls? Well, my father, of blessed memory, was one of those, taught by his mother that the family had been secret Jews for centuries. When she came to the U.S., she brought her Shabbat candelabra with her. And let's take a look at that candelabra. There we go. Yes. When she was in Italy, my grandmother took this candelabra along with her Shabbat candles, her challah and her wine, and she took it downstairs into the cantina, or we would call the basement, so many times that when she came to America, she did the very same thing. Her very first Friday night in Pittsburgh, she gathered up her Shabbat items and she headed downstairs. My father stopped her at the cellar door. He said, "Mama, no, no, this is America. This is the land of the free. This is the home of the brave." And Nonna stopped him and said, "No sono sicura." You never know. And what she was doing was an example of how Jewish practices survived. As a matter of fact, the look of this candelabra is important because this is a Shabbat candelabra in the Italkit, or the Sephardic tradition. We know that there are two cultural groups, Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and but there was a cultural group specific to the first Jews in the diaspora, the Italians, called Italkit, and the lighting of the Shabbat candles was done by a shamas candle, and that would be the one in the middle. You'll notice it's a little higher. And so what my grandmother would do would put the two candles into the holders on the far left and the far right, another candle in the middle that was used to light the other two. And as she became friendly with other Jews in the neighborhood, Ashkenazi Jewish women said, "That's not Shabbat. You only light two candles. You don't like three." And because she didn't understand the tradition, because established Judaism had been wiped out for centuries in southern Italy, she thought she was doing it wrong. But so she continued until she died, taking her candles downstairs into the cantina, and that is the Shabbat candelabra that we use in our family today. And that's how Jewish practices survived. Jewish Italians had something so simple, something that served them so well. Testa dura, we say, stubbornness, fortitude, good common sense. If they want to believe that they pressured us into conversion, good. Let them think that. We know better. You take away our synagogue, we take our candles into our homes. You tell us we can't be Jews in the dining room, we take the candles into the basement. We can't have Rosh Hashanah on our new year. Okay, we'll blow the shofar, the special horn, on December 31st. In my book, I write about this hidden Jewish phenomenon. It is the story of the midnight shofar. For most of us, when we imagine a shofar, we envision this, which is the Ashkenazi bushbach or ram's horn. But in the Sephardic tradition, the shofar is different. This is a Sephardic shofar, and it is from an animal that is native to our southern Italian mountains. It is from the horn of a stambecco. Let's look at the animal. We would call it in English ibex. There he is. There he is. And on December 31st, on New Year's Eve, and right around at midnight, if we are very, very quiet, we hear the sound of the shofar. You can bring me back, so I'll give you a chance to look at it again. There it is. And yeah, here we go. We can hear the sound of this shofar in the mountain communities. When I followed the sound several years ago, I encountered my neighbor called Annibale, and he explained that molto tempo fa, long ago, it was too dangerous to sound the shofar in the autumn at the time of the Rosh Hashanah. But the desire to make the sound and hear the sound was so great, Anibale said, sounding the shofar on the secular New Year was one way to be secretly Jewish. And so the midnight shofar is an example of how our traditions survived. When it was too dangerous, when it was too dangerous to be openly Jewish, we attached Jewish traditions to existing Christian or secular holidays, once again, hiding in plain sight. So what about Passover? We can't call it Pesach. We have to say Pasqua, and we'll eat pani atzimo, unleavened bread. And when you ask us why, we'll say per la Pasqua dei Ebrei, for the Easter of the Jews. But we will celebrate the Seder Hamishi. And let's take a look at our photo of the Seder Hamishi. There we go. Yes, these are our Anosim families. The Seder Hamishi is on the fifth night, coming from Hamish and also meaning friendly. And it is a Passover Seder that is held not on the first night, not on the second, but on an off night. Why? Well, during the time of the Inquisition, brave Christian families offered a room in their home so that their Jewish neighbors could have Pesach far from the suspicious eyes of the Inquisition authorities, who were snooping around town on the first night of Passover, looking to trap crypto Jews who were observing. So at great peril to themselves and their families, Christians made it possible for their Jewish neighbors to observe. We have revived the Hamishi Seder as a tribute to the descendants of Christian families whose courage allowed our traditions to survive. And every year, you can bring me back now. And every year we hold a Seder Hamishi, and the lighting of the candles is done by a Christian woman whose traditions are from the area, and who probably had family members that might have allowed a Jewish woman to kosher a room in their home on an off night to have Passover. What else did we do? Well, we put red strings over our babies' cribs, but we won't say that that's a Jewish tradition from the Kabbalah. That's just too dangerous. Instead, we'll say to keep away the evil eye. When we break an egg into the bowl and we see a blood spot, we'll make sure to take it out, not because it's a kosher tradition, but because it's just isn't healthy. And we will never eat dairy and meat in the same meal because famale, it's not good for the digestion. And when dinner is over, we'll sweep the floor to the center of the room, never toward the door, out of respect for the mezuzah that long ago once was there. No talit, no prayer shawl, no problem. We will take our profession of weaving and dyeing fabric, and secretly we will make our own religious garment. And let's take a look at one of our weavers, our local weavers, Mirella Leone. There she is. There she is. This is weaver Mirella Leone. She has been weaving shawls from the Ginestra or the broom fiber for years, carrying on the tradition of her great-grandmothers. Mirella discovered her Jewish roots and is proud to tell visitors that no matter what she weaves, there is always a thread of blue visible in every piece. We put the blue thread, she says, because it is so in the Bible. And I'm wearing the tallit that she made for me, and she's wearing a tallit that I was given to me in Winnipeg, in Canada. And it was so emotional for her to have the tallit on with the Hebrew words on the Atara. It was quite an emotional moment for someone whose family has been keeping traditions alive for centuries, and finally had the opportunity to have those traditions acknowledged. When I asked why her shawls were not called sciarpe, which is the Italian word, the typical Italian name for a scarf or a shawl, Mirella said, "These are special. They have their own name. They are called vancale. Vancale is a dialect word that means the embrace of God." And so it goes. Over decades, and you can bring me back, over decades, centuries really, We took our Jewish traditions into our homes and our hearts, and slowly, slowly, first for safety reasons, then for cultural reasons, the religious meanings of these rituals were lost. Our Jewish customs became family traditions, and sadly, nothing more. And now we'll take a look at the map. There we go. This is where we are. And I always say I'm in the toe of the boot, but actually I'm in that really little narrow part right above the toe. As a matter of fact, from Tiriolo, the town nearest to us, if you stand on the balcony of the local hotel, you can see both the Ionian Sea and the Mediterranean Sea at the same time. It is a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful view. And what you're looking at is the region of Calabria. It is about the geographical size of the U.S. state of Virginia. In this blue area, prior to the Inquisition, historians believe that 50% of the population was Jewish. Dr. Sergio Della Pergola, who is an expert demographer, has just written some very interesting things about permutations and number of Jews there would be in the world had there not been the Holocaust. Sergio Della Pergola posits that today there are approximately 50 million people in the Mediterranean region and in the countries that comprise South and Central America, 50 million whose backgrounds include lost Jewish roots. And let's meet some of those Enosim right now. You can bring me back. The first person I want to share with you is Gianna Forti. Her ancestors made the journey that the historians describe from Sicily to the ankle of the boot. And these are her words. I remember when I was just a little girl and my great-grandmother, she was still alive. We lived in Nicastro, the old city center. It was my grandmother, my bisnonna, who told me that even though our family always went to church, we only went because we had to. But then when there was a wedding, we had this tradition to make a blessing, sotto la coperta, under the cloth. You see, one of the women, like my great-grandmother, would spend nearly a year crocheting a beautiful bedspread, big enough for the bride and groom's brand new double bed. But the first time that anyone saw it was on the wedding day. Let's take a look at this coperta. Yes, with the sky, with the Calabrian cobalt blue sky shining through. But the first time that anyone saw this coperta was on the wedding day. 4 men of the family would each take a corner and they would hold the coperta over the heads of the wedding couple. The two fathers would make a blessing in a secret language. Later on, when I came to the synagogue and heard Rabbi Barbara singing these wedding blessings, I recognized Hatan, groom, bride, Hebrew words. The blessings I heard as a child were in Hebrew, the language of the Jews. And now I want to show you something. And so you can bring me back here. At first glance, this appears to be a Bible, a Catholic Bible printed in Italian. And indeed it is. It is quite old. As you can see, the spine has ripped away and some of the pages are stuck together. They're victims of the humidity that plagues our mountain villages. But what is so special about this Catholic Bible is not what's inside, but what is missing. My great aunt, Angela Scalise, sister of my grandmother, Margherita Felicia Scalise, was determined to keep Jewish traditions alive, which was nearly impossible to do, mainly because all vestiges of Judaism, not just the synagogues, mind you, but the Judaica, the holy books, the documents, were destroyed by the Inquisition authorities centuries ago when Jewish families, after their forced conversions, were then forced to bring all of their Jewish items to the town square, to the piazza, where they were set on fire. Jewish traditions were lost. And as the centuries passed, it was more and more difficult, not only to pass along traditions, but even worse, to remember what those traditions might have been. But Zia Angela, she was determined. She knew that the Catholic book contained 5 books of Moses, which was known in the mountains as La Bibbia Ebraica. And from somewhere, somebody had told her that these same 5 books were called the Torah. And let's take a look at the Torah. There we go. So it says La Genesis. So Zia Angela took the Bible that I just showed you, and carefully cut out Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And look what she did. Look at the far left side. She sewed them together to make what was for Zia the only example of Torah that our family ever had. And I'll show you the real one here. You can bring me back. Here it is. It is an absolute family treasure. Absolute family treasure. Because with these stitched pages, Zia faithfully read the Torah stories to her grandchildren, story after story of Abramo, Sarah, Rachel, Jacobe, and with practically nothing at hand but needle, thread, and determination, Zia Angela made her very own handmade Torah and single-handedly kept Jewish traditions alive. Another Bat Anusim, daughter of ancestors forced to convert from Judaism, is Angela Yael Amato, who, like me, discovered and embraced her Jewish roots. Angela is an accomplished violinist, was born in Naples to parents with hidden Jewish heritage. She studied in London, married there, and is the mother of Alessandro, who became the very first bar mitzvah in our synagogue community. And that would be our next photo. And that's Alessandra and Angela on the right, when he was called to the Torah as a bar mitzvah, the very first one in our community. Our synagogue was dedicated in 2006. We expanded in 2014, and Alexandra became bar mitzvah in 2015. And it was Angela who encouraged me to expand our program and to include destination bar and bat mitzvah celebrations. So for 18 years now, we have been welcoming Jewish and Jewish interfaith families to our synagogue so that their children can experience Jewish diversity right here in our Italian mountains. One mother put it so well when she said, "Our son Tyler had no idea that there are places in the world where it's not easy to be Jewish, where our precious traditions have survived amid centuries of persecution." Tyler made an immediate comparison between New Jersey and Sarasota. He said, "One synagogue in the mountains, and people drive hours to come. It's so easy for us who have synagogues in every neighborhood to take it all for granted." Our congregants speak eloquently about perseverance and determination and testadura to continue to search for our lost traditions and then to highlight those traditions, especially for Italians who believe that they may have Jewish roots. In fact, my own grandmother, Margherita Felicia Scalise, was determined to maintain the remnant of Jewish practice that was passed along by her parents. And let's look at my great-grandparents. These are my great-grandparents, Saverio Scalise and Angela Rosa Grande, crypto-Jews who trace their Jewish heritage back to Toledo in Spain. It was great-grandfather Saverio Scalise who led Jewish prayer, and I often wondered how he could do this. And people in the town here have told me, "Did you know your great-grandfather, he knew some Jewish prayers?" And I thought, nice story. Maybe he knew 5 words of Hebrew and he didn't hold the book upside down, so they gave him the job. But actually, later on, I learned that he traveled by horse and cart and steamship from Naples to Montreal, Canada, 4 times in an 11-year period, just so that he could study with a Val di Davide Hasidic community and bring those traditions back here to Calabria. And that community in Montreal, Valley of David, is still in existence today. and you can bring me back. Felicia's mother, Angela Rosa Grande, whom you just saw, insisted that her daughter understand and appreciate their Jewish heritage, especially since so many of the Grande family had been judged as Judaizers and had their property confiscated by Inquisition authorities. Amazingly, the Grande family escaped persecution as they ran from the Inquisition, and thankfully, they took their Jewish traditions with them. And from their stories, my own work actually began. I became investigatore, searching for Jews through their family stories. Gianna, Zia Angela, Attilio, Marisa, Mirella, Angela. We are only a few of the many hundreds or maybe thousands of Calabrians and Southern Italians whose personal stories include remnants of Jewish tradition. My father, Antonio Abramo Aiello, of blessed memory, recalls the early years of his crypto-Jewish family. And let's see a picture of my dad with his family. There's my dad wearing a tie with his sister, Angelina, Amalia, and Natalia, and that is my grandmother. I think it's important to point out she was 42 years old. It's a tough life, hard life here. And this is what my dad had to say. When I was a boy here in the village, the public school ended in the third grade, but Mama was determined I should continue my education. She wanted me to know Torah, so she found an older gentleman to teach me. Unfortunately, he lived far down the mountain in Nicastro, but that did not deter my mother. She found a farmer who routinely made the trip to market on Mondays and Thursdays. So twice a week, I sat atop artichokes or potatoes or broccoli. Oh, how I wished for lettuce, while the farmer drove his load of produce in a horse-drawn cart to Timpone, the Jewish quarter of Nicastro. He went to market, I went to study. I never knew my teacher's name. To me, he was maestro, and that was all. I think Jews were still afraid of being found out. He taught me the Bible, but his Jewish stories were the ones I really liked best, especially the one about how Italy got its name. And it goes like this. And then my father told me a story that has been passed along among Calabrian Jews for centuries. It happened during the time of the Maccabees rebellion, and the Jews were faced with heavy losses. The Maccabees needed more soldiers, and they needed them quickly. That's when the Jews formed scouting parties that sailed from Judea in search of mercenary soldiers to help their cause. And as their tiny craft drifted farther into the sea, the Jews, with of course no GPS, the Jews aboard viewed a beautiful mist rising from the miles of pristine Calabrian coastline. In Hebrew, they shouted, Aitalia. Ai is the Hebrew word for island. Tal, T-A-L, is the Hebrew word for dew, meaning like the mist and the dew. And Yah is a contracted form of one of the names of God in Psalm 68 and other places as well. Ai Tal Yah, Italia, which means the island of God's dew. There are historians today who believe that was once only a legend is actually true. These Jews gave Italy its name. The Jews liked what they saw and they stayed. They created communities, prospered as traders, developed a rich cultural life that was neither Sephardi or Ashkenazi, as I mentioned earlier, but a Jewish cultural tradition that was so unique that it even had its own name, Italkit, a culture that began more than 1,600 years ago, remnants of which exist today. Here in Calabria and in Sicily, there are so many families with deep Jewish roots, as well as Italian Americans, Italian Canadians, Australians, families whose roots run deep in Southern Italian soil, men and women who are longing to know who they are and who they were. So it's become my task to look beyond the superficial, to remember that being Jewish is less about names and noses, but more about the soul of our people. And like all lost and isolated Jews, the Jews of Calabria and throughout South Italy represent a special and crucial opportunity. These are the people who at first glance seem to be outside of what we assume as the normal or the usual Jewish experience. But my years here in Calabria have taught me to listen not only to historians who have now begun to acknowledge the strong Jewish presence that we find here, but even when they weren't completely certain about what or why of their practice, Calabrian Jews clung to these traditions. But now we know. So the next time we Jews meet an Italian who says, I've always been close to the Jewish people, I've always felt a pull, I've always felt Jewish. All my friends are Jewish. My wife is Jewish. My husband is Jewish. My mother-in-law says I'm more Jewish than her son. You can reach out with an open hand and an open heart, and you can say, you may feel Jewish because long, long ago, your Calabrian family may have been Jewish. There are ways to explore your heritage, ways to learn more about who you are and who you were. And around the world, there are organizations and synagogues and individuals who will support you on your journey. Bentornata a casa. Welcome home. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting so many comments of just how delightful this presentation has been. And I completely agree. There are a few questions. I hope that it's okay if we take a few moments for them.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a bit about language. Were there any specific Jewish Italian dialects that existed at one point, or maybe there's currently attempting to be preserved, or were people mostly praying in either Italian or Hebrew?
Mostly they were praying probably in Italian if they had an opportunity in this area to contact my great grandfather, they might have learned some Hebrew. But the interesting thing is, although there is no Calabrian Jewish dialect, many Hebrew words have infiltrated the basic Calabrian dialect of these mountains. I'll give you an example. My husband was born here in this town, and he's the cook in the family. He tells me to bring my passport to the kitchen because it's a foreign country, but that's another story. So I do the cleanup, and we were sitting around the table, and I was taking the crumbs from the table, and he said, "Look, you missed one. You missed a chametz." I said, "What?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, how come you're not saying molike?" And he said, well, because in Italian dialect, chametz means crumb. I said, that's Hebrew. It's Hebrew. And then when you have a piece of land away from your home and you build a little shed, and so that if as you're working the land, if it rains or you keep your tools in there or whatever, what is it called? A baita, from Bayit. And there are many, many, many words like that I'm uncovering because I'm quite an anomaly, an Italian from the mountains here where these little Jewish settlements were so cleverly hidden, who can ferret out some of these Hebrew words that many people think are just amalgams of Calabrian dialect. Do we have another question?
Thank you. We touched on connections to Montreal, to Pittsburgh, I'm sure some other places. Can you talk about, are there areas in the Italian Jewish diaspora that have large communities that are still quite connected to their roots in South Italy?
Only recently, because as I said, I've been here, I've been in Italy 20 years, 2 years in Milan, and 18 years here in the South. And many of the families who come for bar and bat mitzvah for their children are often interfaith families where there is a Jewish mother or father, and then an Italian American mother or father that, of course, are married to each other, and they want to give their child a sense of both traditions. And come to find out, when I hear the surnames and I look back in our research and some of our primary and secondary sources, because we do surname research for people, we find that there's Jewish roots to the surnames. And so people will go home, and sometimes what we offer here, and we offer synagogues who are interested for people to discover and or embrace their Jewish roots. Some people are happy to discover that their family traditions that seem so odd or unusual are actually Jewish, and they're happy with that discovery. Others want to go further and embrace their Jewish roots. And slowly, slowly, as more and more Italian Americans particularly want to embrace their Jewish roots, they're starting to kind of form we call circola, little circles of interest. But it's a long and complicated process because of in a way the I don't want to call it prejudice, but it's kind of the stereotype is probably a better word, that you're Italian, you can't be Jewish. And so there's a lot to overcome.
Thank you. Just to confirm, if people have questions about their own surname, about their own potential Jewish roots, is contacting you a good way of getting started, or do you have other resources that you can point people to?
We do Italian Jewish surname research. We have a program that we offer, and there are 3 of us who who do the searches. We started out 20 years ago with about 20 sources. Now we have 54 different sources, and we provide a report. There is a fee for that. However, if you're just interested to know if your Italian surname has Jewish roots, you can go to my website, rabbibarbara.com, click on Italian Jewish roots, and look at the list of surnames. Also, you can, if you speak Italian, there's a new book out that features us along with a lot of other historians and demographers who are studying this. It's called Ebrei in Calabria. Let me just get it for you.
Wonderful. And while Rabbi's going and fetching that book, I just want to reiterate that we will be sharing a recording later today.
Here we go. It's a 500-page book, Ebrei in Calabria. It has lots and lots of surnames, lots of the history, much more in detailed examples of what I was talking to you about being the first Jews in the diaspora. It's written by my colleague, Professor Villela, has a big 15 pages of photos. Most of them are from our synagogue because we are the only active synagogue in the entire region of Calabria in 500 years since the Inquisition. And this book is available from Amazon as well. We're hoping to get an English translation at some point, but right now it's very, very useful. Very proud of this volume too. It just came out 2 months ago.
Thank you. And
Shall we?
We are
Go ahead, Mar.
at time, but I just there's so many people who have been so moved by your presentation today that they're interested in coming to South Italy and seeing what the Jewish life there. Yes. Can you just share a little bit about either tours or is there access to more traditional ritual needs? Is there kosher food? Is there do people
I'm
just
glad you've
email you for everything?
Sure. Well, because I'm kind of it here at the moment, but we're happy to help you. We do some mini tours, and we have a day fee, and where we take you through where you saw all the pictures of the castle and the plaque and the Jewish quarter that's still intact. We show all of that to you. And then we bring you to our village, and we do a tour of the synagogue. We go into the church, and we take a look at Moses and the 10 Commandments. Then we come up to the synagogue, and we have a small museum attached to the synagogue. And then we go to the Ferramonte concentration camp, where 4,000 Jews there was a concentration camp in Italy, and where 4,000 Jews were saved by Italian soldiers and local villagers. And there's a wonderful museum there as well. So there's a wonderful, rich history here. We have no kosher stores, kosher products easily available. We keep kosher by maintaining vegetarian traditions in our synagogue and in my own home. and there is no products with the hexer on it. The closest place to buy kosher products is 3 hours north in Naples, in Napoli. I'll conclude, and I hope you'll come. If you'd like to come, we'd love to share through 2.5-3 days with you. I'd like to end with Bendigamos. It's a wonderful piece of music. It is it is part of the seventh night of Hanukkah, which is called the Night of the Daughters, and it is of Sephardic Jewish tradition. And the song itself is in Ladino, which is Judeo-Spagnolo, Jewish Spanish language. And it is part of the Hillel, the Hallel after for the grace after meals. It means, blessed is the one most high, the eternal one who created us. Let us give thanks for all the good things we have been given. Bendigamos al Altísimo, al Señor que nos creó. Démosle agradecimiento por los bienes que nos dio. Alabado sea su santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado. Odula Adonai Kitov, Kilei Olam, Pasto. Alabado sea su santo nombre, porque siempre nos ha apiado. Odula Adonai Kitov, Kilei Olam, Pasto. It's been my honor to be in your presence today. Toda rabah, mille mille gracia. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.